Here's a favorite of ours, grandsons. Alfie gets in first. We see Alfie in this picture. What's he doing? You see him running. And there's Alfie's mom. And who's in the stroller? Is that Annie Rose? Annie Rose is Alfie's little sister, isn't she? Alfie gets in first. It's the first picture. The words say, one day, Alfie and Mum and Annie Rose were coming home from the shops. Alfie ran on ahead because he wanted to get home first. He ran all the way from the corner to the front gate and up the steps to the front door. Do you see them at the corner here? That's what they mean by from the corner. And we can see Alfie running, and he's quite a bit ahead of his mom and Annie Rose, isn't he? And all the little gates, see there's gates along here, and he's looking for the one that is the gate for his house. And here's Mom and Annie Rose. Can you see all of the things here? They've got a basket of things here that they've been to the store to buy. And now they're walking home. What do you think about what Annie Rose is doing? How do you think Annie Rose is feeling right now? Let's think about that a little bit, okay? As the story goes on. We know how Alfie's feeling. Alfie just wants to be fast, doesn't he? Do you ever have times like that when you just want to run and not stop? That could be a lot of fun, can't it? Run and run and run. Alfie's feeling very speedy today. Then he sat down on the top step and waited for the others. Along came Mum, pushing Annie Rose and the shopping. I raced you, called Alfie. You see him sitting here on the step. I raced you, called Alfie. I'm back first. So there. Is he pleased with himself, do you think? He's feeling very speedy. It's a nice way to feel sometimes, isn't it? Annie Rose didn't care. She was tired. She sat back in her pushchair and sucked her thumb. Can you see Annie Rose there, sucking her thumb? Her eyes are almost closed and she's tired. What do you see across the street? I can see two things that are interesting. One is this right here. What's that? A little dog, right? And then this person right here. We're going to read about her in the story. She's somebody we've met before. And all the way in the back there, do you see somebody playing or running? Who else is in this picture? There's one more somebody in the picture. Who's this? That's Alfie and Annie Rose's little cat, isn't it? Kind of waiting for them on the front step, isn't the cat? Jessie, I think the cat's name is. Mum put the brake on the pushchair and left Annie Rose at the bottom of the steps while she lifted the basket of shopping up to the top. Then she found the key and opened the front door. Alfie dashed in ahead of her. I've won, he shouted. There he is. He's inside the house. You see, Mom's got her shopping here, the basket. And there's her keys that she used to open the door. And can you see Annie Rose all the way back here? She's watching what's going on, isn't she? And Alfie's running in the house. He's the first one in, and he's very happy about that. Mom put the shopping down in the hall and went back down the steps to lift Annie Rose out of her pushchair. But what do you think Alfie did then? So there's Alfie. He's standing by the door. There's the shopping and Mom's keys. There's Mom and Annie Rose. She's taking Annie Rose out of the stroller. And it says, what do you think Alfie did then? Do you have a guess? Let's find out. Uh-oh, what did he do? What does that look like? Can you tell? He gave the door a great big slam. Bang! Just like that. You think he's happy about what he did? It probably made a fun noise, nice and loud. See? And he's feeling quite happy about that. Here's the door. This thing right here is called a letterbox. The postman puts, or the postal carrier puts the mail in there. Has a little slot from the outside. You put the mail in there. And then this is called the catch, and that's what locks and unlocks the door. Okay, we need to know that for more of the story. So he gave the door a big slam. Now there he is. Here's the door right here, and there's Alfie. Then Mom was outside the door, holding Annie Rose, and Alfie was inside with the shopping. Mom's key was inside too. Alfie's kind of staring at the door now, isn't he? What does Mom need? What does Alfie's mom need in order to open the door? She needs this key, doesn't she? But she doesn't have it. It's inside with Alfie. Open the door, Alfie, said Mum. But Alfie didn't know how to open the door from the inside. The catch was too high up. Mum looked into the letterbox. Remember we looked at that letterbox a minute ago? Mum looked into the letterbox. Try to reach the catch and turn it, she said. Alfie tried. Can you see him trying? But he couldn't quite reach it. Can you put the key through the letterbox, said Mum. But Alfie couldn't reach the letterbox either. So here's Alfie on this side of the door, on the inside of the door. There's the door right there. And Alfie's trying very hard to reach way up there, but he's not tall enough, is he? He can't reach where Mom's telling him to reach. And there's Alfie's mom and Annie Rose. What do you think about how Annie Rose is feeling? She doesn't look entirely happy, does she? And here we go. There's that same child playing, and we can see now from the picture that the child has roller skates on. Roller skates are fast. The dog is still here, and this lady here is Mrs. McNally. She's wondering what's happening, isn't she? All right, Let's see what happens. Annie Rose was hungry as well as tired. She began to cry. Then Alfie began to cry too. You see Alfie there? He didn't like being all by himself on the wrong side of the door. No, he wouldn't like that, would he? That would feel very lonely and scary. The door's still here, closed, and our friend Alfie has started to cry. He's not happy at all, right? And out here, do you see Annie Rose crying? Oh, she sure is, isn't she? She's not happy. And when babies are unhappy, they very often cry. Just then, Mrs. McNally came hurrying across the street to see what all the noise was about. That was kind. She was being a nice neighbor, wasn't she? Trying to see if she could help. And Chessie the cat's had enough. Chessie's going to leave. She doesn't like all that noise. She and Mum took it in turns to say encouraging things into the letterbox. See them leaning down and trying to talk to Alfie? They're probably saying, Alfie, open the door. Alfie, put the key through the letterbox. Something encouraging like that, right? It'll be okay, Alfie. Is Annie Rose happy about the whole thing? Oh dear, she's really crying now, isn't she? And there's somebody coming on a bicycle. I'm going to read about that person in just a minute and remember who that is. But Alfie still couldn't open the door. Do you see him crying? Alfie still couldn't open the door. Go and fetch your little chair from the sitting room, and then you'll be able to reach the catch, said Mum. But Alfie didn't try to fetch his little chair. Do you see him there? He didn't try to fetch his little chair. He just went on crying louder and louder. Sometimes when you're crying a lot, it's very difficult to think about what maybe you could do to solve the problem. I think as long as Alfie is still crying so much, he's not going to be able to solve this problem, is he? He just went on crying louder and louder. And Annie Rose cried louder and louder too. Nobody seems very happy right now, do they? Alfie's crying. Mom's worried. Annie Rose is crying. Mrs. McNally is worried. And then Mrs. McNally says, "There's my Maureen," said Mrs. McNally. "I'm sure she'll be able to help." She's put her bike down, and now she's walking over to see what's going on. There's somebody peeking out the window here. Can you see that? People are beginning to wonder what's happening over there. Is everything okay? But right now it's not okay, is it? Alfie and Annie Rose are both crying a lot. Mrs. McNally's Maureen was a big girl. Right away, she came and joined Mum and Annie Rose and Mrs. McNally on the top step. Might have to break a window," she said. But I'll try to climb up the drain pipe first if you like. But Mrs. McNally didn't like that idea at all. Oh, no, Maureen. You might hurt yourself, she said. Just then, Alfie's very good friend, the milkman, came up the street in his milk float. That's just a funny name for the van that he's driving. So Annie Rose is still crying, and Mom and Mrs. McNally and Maureen are all talking. And there's the milkman coming up the street. This person's still looking out the window, seeing what's happening. A lot of people kind of getting involved. And let's see what's happening to our friend Alfie on the other side. What do you think about how Alfie's looking? He still has a tear on his face, doesn't he? Is he still crying as loudly as he was before? We said he couldn't think very clearly about how to solve the problem if he was crying too much. But he's kind of stopped now, hasn't he? I wonder what he's thinking. When he saw Mom and Annie Rose and Mrs. McNally and Mrs. McNally's Maureen all standing on the top step, he stopped his float and said, "What's the trouble?" So they told him. "Don't worry, mate," the milkman shouted. "We'll soon have you out of there." So there's the milkman talking to Alfie through the letterbox. And there's Mom and Annie Rose crying and crying. And Mrs. McNally and Mrs. McNally's Maureen. Mrs. McNally looks worried, but Maureen's watching something else. Let's see what she's watching. There's the milkman's milk float, his van. Who is this here that Maureen is watching? It's a man with a ladder. There's somebody else watching all the noise and confusion, right? And now two people looking out this window. Everyone's curious about what's happening. So the milkman says they'll soon have him out of there. But let's see what our friend Alfie's doing over here. Here's the door. Can you see it all the way on this side of the picture? But Alfie's not standing next to the door anymore. What is he doing? Is he still crying? Looks like he stopped crying, hasn't he? And he's walking away from the door. Where do you suppose he's going? Well, let's keep reading so we'll find out what happens. Looks like this lock's going to be difficult to break, said the milkman. But then Mrs. McNally's Maureen had a very good idea. She ran, see her running? She ran to ask the window cleaner. This man with the ladder is the window cleaner. He's come to clean all these really high windows. She ran to ask the window cleaner who was working up the street if he would bring his ladder and climb up to the bathroom window. And of course, when the window cleaner heard about Alfie, he came hurrying along with his ladder as quickly as he could. So there's Maureen. She's running to get the window cleaner, and people looking out to see what's going on. And there's the window cleaner getting ready to climb up to that window to wash it. And here on the step we have the milkman. Mrs. McNally's trying to help with Annie Rose, but Annie Rose doesn't want anything to do with that. And babies are upset. They usually just want one person. Right now she wants her mom, and mostly she wants something to eat and to go inside. She's little and she doesn't understand about locked doors. So we've got the window cleaner coming with his ladder as quickly as he can. But what is our friend Alfie doing on the other side of the door? He's not here. Where is he? Let's look for him. There's Alfie. And what is he doing? Can you tell? He's carrying something. What is he carrying? Looks to me like he might be carrying a chair. He's kind of holding it upside down, but I think it's a chair. There we are. Then Mom and Annie Rose and Mrs. McNally and Mrs. McNally's Maureen and the milkman all stood on the top step and watched while the window cleaner put his ladder up against the house. He started to climb up to the bathroom window. So they're all crowded around there, and they're watching the window cleaner. And a lot of other people are watching too. Everybody's watching the window cleaner. But when he was halfway up the ladder, what do you think happened? Do you have any guesses? Here's the door again. And there's Alfie, and what is he doing? He's standing up, climbing up on that chair. Can you see that? He looks quite determined now. Let's see what happens. The front door suddenly opened, and there was Alfie. He had managed to reach the catch and turn it like that, after all. Oh, such a good job, Alfie. See, there's his chair. He climbed up on the chair, and because he was up high on the chair, he could reach the catch to open the door. So there's the window cleaner and Mrs. McNally and Annie Rose and Alfie's mom and the milkman and Maureen, and they're all so surprised. And Alfie opened the door. He was very pleased with himself. He looks very pleased with himself, doesn't he? He opened the front door as wide as it would go and stood back grandly to let everybody in. This is a big picture. Then the window cleaner came down from his ladder, and he and the milkman and Mrs. McNally's Maureen and Mrs. McNally and Annie Rose and Mom and Alfie all went into the kitchen and had tea together. We've got something to eat here with the tea. It's like maybe some bread and honey, right? Mom's holding the teapot. Mrs. McNally has her teacup. Annie Rose looks much more contented now, doesn't she? She's warm and comfortable, and she has something to eat. It's a nice plate of things to eat there. Everybody's enjoying something. Alfie's got what looks like a piece of bread, maybe some of that bread and honey. There's the milkman. He's got a cup of tea. And the window cleaner, he's got a cup of tea. They all went into the kitchen and had tea together. The end. I hope you enjoyed that story. I love you.